and Happy New Year! Welcome to this week's episode of our book club for Star Wars Dark Disciple by Christie Golden. If you are not familiar with the series, go ahead and check it out in the description if you want to go back to the beginning. But basically, we are going through this book a couple of chapters at a time, talking about the themes and happenings to really dig deep into what's going on. Today we are discussing chapters 13 and 14. So where I last left you guys off, we were at a bit of a cliffhanger. Quinlan Vos has just confessed to Asajj Ventress that he was a Jedi all along, and we get Ventress's response of, she knew. She's known for a little while, or at least since he survived his fall on Mustafar. So this conversation between them, this whole journey between over these next two chapters takes some really interesting turns. On the one hand, I think it's fascinating that Ventress takes him at face value, that she believes him, that she's not really angry at him for lying to her in a way where she could have very easily felt betrayed, but also that there will continue to kind of be this unknowing trust issue between the two of them. But she appreciates his honesty such as it is now. When Vos decides to tell her everything, that includes the eventual attack on Dooku and how that is his ultimate goal, which is how she kind of gets in on being okay with the plan. She would love to kill Dooku, but she warns him that this is going to cost him more than he realizes. And these next two chapters are really the beginning to what that cost is going to be, and just what it means to give up being a Jedi. That it's not simply taking the life of someone, without being in a fair fight. This is not challenging Count Dooku to a duel, and then beating him in fair combat, that they're going to be doing something dastardly and they're moving with the intent to kill, which in of itself is already not a Jedi thing. It's also going to take the reality of the mindset of being good enough to beat Count Dooku, that it's going to go down this road of fighting fire with fire. And Ventress is kind of willing to see how far this will go, but she already warns that he's kind of walking away from how the Jedi handle things and the Jedi ideas of attachment, how even though he was grieving the family of the Pikes, which would be a normal thing to do, that he was basically drinking his sorrows away, and how that's not really a Jedi thing. So she can already see that he's somebody who's kind of malleable in this way, especially because of his willingness to be changed. But what I find ultimately tragic about this whole question is something I kind of talked about at the beginning of the series, is that this whole question is moot, right? Like, the idea, it's one thing if Dooku really is the war, as he's described in this book by Vos. It's one thing if killing Dooku would actually end the war. It's one thing if Dooku would actually cause all of this to cease, right? That's already an intense ethical conundrum. Would you lose yourself to kill one person? So it's basically two people that are lost so that a galaxy can be saved. But the ultimate tragedy of this is that killing Dooku is not going to end the war. That Dooku is very actively the second Sith. And really losing Dooku is ultimately a part of Sidious's plan. It's really hard for me to view this question anywhere outside of the reality, which is all of this is wrong because Dooku isn't the war. All of this is wrong because stopping him isn't really going to stop anything. You're actually doing what Sidious wants in doing so. So even if you manage to succeed, you've ultimately achieved nothing, right? It's such an interesting question for, would it be worth it for one Jedi to lose their soul to save the galaxy? But that's just not what's happening here, and it's never going to be what's happening here. And I think that's part of the conundrum of the question in of itself, is if you've reached the point of asking yourself the question, is it worth it to lose yourself to save the galaxy? You gotta be darn sure that losing yourself would actually save the galaxy. Because is it worth it for a chance, right? Is losing yourself worth it for a shot at saving the galaxy instead of the surety of saving the galaxy? And it's that added layer that coats this entire story with, this is not going to go well right from jump. Not that we're at jump. We're actually making pretty good progress through the book itself. But it's been there since the beginning of the story. In a way, I'd kind of connect this to Legends a little bit, to go back to the first Knights of the Old Republic game. Spoilers for that game, but that game's over 15 years old now. But in it, you learn about the Jedi Revan, who left the Jedi to go fight in the Mandalorian Wars, to go fight against the Mandalorians who were attacking the Republic. The idea was you lose some of yourself as a Jedi if you're going out to be an aggressive general in a war, much like we see in the Clone Wars. The idea was that it was worth it to Revan to ultimately save the Republic. And after the Mandalorian Wars, Revan continues on a quest that ultimately leads to him falling to the dark side. And his sacrifice is only so much because if you look at, like, the big story of the Old Republic in Legends, that there was this inevitability to the villain that comes through the Old Republic MMO game of the Sith Emperor that comes out of there that basically orchestrated everything that happened. And so there's this idea of Jedi hitting this moral conundrum of what do we do, but being presented with the wrong question. They're tricked into asking the wrong morality question and losing themselves to the wrong morality question. Not that it's a bad question to explore, but in going down it, they're being tricked down the wrong path. And it's something, I keep saying tragic, but it is tragic, but it's also something fascinating to watch, to realize that this keeps happening to the Jedi narratively throughout Star Wars. Voss checks in with Kenobi again, is now able to report that things are moving along swimmingly, though he doesn't really say why. Obi-Wan has this general sense of foreboding that something has shifted, but he ultimately wants to trust Voss. Voss is another Jedi Master. And Obi-Wan can feel a certain way about things or be worried, but it's not his job to babysit Voss. And Voss knows more about what's going on than Obi-Wan does. So he doesn't necessarily want to push a fellow master, but he's worried. And there's a particular line when Obi-Wan is trying to say, like, hey, watch out for Ventress, she's tricky. And Voss says, well, she's been faithful to me, which is very much a shift romantically from Voss's perspective, and one that Obi-Wan doesn't necessarily put the pieces together. I don't think Obi-Wan necessarily wants to put the pieces together. We've seen that with other Jedi that he is close to as well. Still in Chapter 13, Ventress now takes Voss to Dathomir and tells him her story. Canonically, this is interesting because this, as I've mentioned before in this series, when this book was being written, it was being written for the Clone Wars at a time when a lot of stuff was canon that didn't stay canon. So this is referencing a lot of Ventress'S backstory that came from the Clone Wars micro-series and some of the other Clone Wars material that happened before the 2008 Clone Wars multimedia campaign. Like, there were 2 Clone Wars multimedia campaigns. One that came out around 2005, lead up to the release of Revenge of the Sith, and then one in 2008 as a part of the 3D animated series. This is kind of interesting because it keeps a lot of what was referenced in the micro-series, the Clone Wars micro-series. I'd have to do more of a side-by-side comparison and revisit parts of the story Dooku Jedi Lost, where we also get some of Ventress's backstory to see fully how it all lines up. But it's just kind of interesting to see bits and pieces from the micro-series remain canon through these different interpretations of her character. While they're on Dathomir, Voss picks up a broken Night Sister bow and reads it, is able to see what happened, and Voss tells Ventress that he can do this. And so Ventress explains more, and she understands that Voss is feeling very deeply the darkness that is going on Dathomir, and has gone on Dathomir. And she tells this story about how she can't bury her sisters, right? That for Night Sisters, part of the afterlife is in how they're buried, and Ventress doesn't know the procedure because she wasn't really a full Night Sister for very long, which adds to the tragedy of her character as well, as to whether or not, she's kind of like new to believing in a lot of the cultural practices of the Night Sisters, but I'm sure it's something where she wishes she could honor her sisters. As she's telling Voss this story, she can tell that Voss wants to comfort her, right? That he's growing in this connection with her, and she doesn't want that. She needs him to learn hatred, and needs him to learn how to use his hatred. And Voss is like, all right, I mean, you're the boss, I guess, but I don't think I'm supposed to. And to illustrate this point, Ventress uses the Force to call out this snake to her. And she starts by just kind of charming it, but then throttles it and kills it. And it's something very gruesome to watch. But she's trying to show, like, this is what the dark side is. It's manipulating, it's killing, it's tricking. And this is what he needs to learn to be capable of, or he's never going to be able to face up against Dooku. It's during this exchange that Voss tells the story of his Jedi Master's death, during the Clone Wars, and Ventress drops this line of like, oh, I remember that. 'Cause Dooku told me, not 'cause I did it. I mean, it hasn't really been spelled out in these pages, but, like, Ventress's response is very much like, and we're gonna say Dooku did it because that's gonna give you the motivation to want to kill Dooku. So here we have a point where Ventress has found Voss to be very open, to tell her the truth when it doesn't necessarily suit him, when it could endanger him. And she takes him at his word and believes him, and to the extent that she can, forgives him, I suppose, for lying to her. But then, as she's trying to teach him this, she's starting to lie to him, because that's kind of what you have to do when you're on the dark side. And it, you know, she is both accepting his openness, but kind of putting this own wall up herself for the purposes of their training, but also for the purposes of how she's feeling, I believe. And these feelings that they're going through culminate in them sharing a kiss, and that is the end of the chapter. And that's kind of like the feelings of everything that's been built up. And it's the point where Voss is kind of going down this dark path. Not that romance is darkness, but that giving in to passions when they may not be advisable certainly is. And it certainly is when the trust that he's feeling towards her is now built upon one lie from her. So then we go to chapter 14, and in chapter 14, Voss is dealing with like I said, the passions of a now fully formed relationship between him and Ventress. This is a sneaky on her part if she did it fully intentionally, but if not, it's just part of how that slope of the dark side can come to you, because now the darkness of what he's doing and he's exploring is coupled with the wonder of being in this relationship, which is something that a Jedi certainly would not have experienced, even a Jedi Master at this point, in theory, right, if they've all been doing what they're supposed to do. And so, yeah, he has these darker negative things that probably would have weighed on his conscience, but they're alongside this other really amazing thing that's a good thing that Jedi don't often get to explore, and so it kind of masks what's really going on, and it causes his head to spin. He's just been, through this whole book, it's been a constant state of like, oh my, what do I do? What is actually right and wrong? And it's continuing down that because of his relationship with Ventress. There is a genuine foundation there. He is glad that she seems to want him and want to be a part of this relationship. It's not just, you know, it would be so easy to tell this story and be like, and then Voss gave in to lust and blah, blah, blah. And that's not what's really going on here, that there is actual feelings that have developed between the two of them, which is important to note. And I think it's important that way because it shows, again, that you could be doing a good thing or a healthy thing, but that good or healthy thing can be manipulated depending on the circumstances from where it comes. They go on various walks. Voss notes what parts of Dathomir she does want to go to, what parts of Dathomir she does not want to go to. During one day where they visit a place that she doesn't go to often, she says it's her village, and that one day he'll be ready to go in, and he's not there yet. As they train together, Ventress continuously grows more distant, and Voss is taking that as it being part of her pain, of her revisiting her home. But of course, it's partly that, but it's also Ventress pulling back because she's trying to teach him as a dark side master would teach him, which is ultimately to say, hey, there's this good thing, and now I have to take this good thing away from you. This is always how dark side stuff happens. So here she replicates the snake example, and she has Voss call in and use the Force, and ultimately has to kill the snake in the same way she did before, and how he needs to draw on darker emotions, draw on losing his master, so that he can call on the dark side at will. And he almost succeeds, but ultimately does not take full control of the snake, and the snake bites him. The snake's bite is not deadly, but it's pretty nasty, and she leaves him to suffer through the venomous bite and in pain and writhing, again, to kind of teach that this is a part of the dark side, that failure is met with consequences, but also that this pain that he's going through right now will become useful as a thing for him to remember, both because of the pain and from the fact that Asajj let him go through it. There were a couple of interesting elements to this exchange, one being that he tries to summon the dark side from the perspective of the greater good. The idea that he needs to be able to do this in order to kill Dooku. Of course, that's not how the dark side works, and I think this is really why it fails him. That he's still trying to draw from the good center of his soul, instead of finding a darker, deeper part that he's supposed to call on. He does talk about and think about how it's one thing to have this dark act to kill Dooku and another thing to attack an innocent creature in this snake, but he's trying to justify it as, but he needs to kill the snake in order to be able to kill Dooku. The difference between the needless torment of killing the snake in this method versus, like, stopping a war, which would stop torment. He's still a good guy. He's still Quinlan Vos, and he's willing to do these darker things, but he's not willing to let go of himself yet. And this is really what Asajj is trying to show him, how much he's going to have to lose, that it's going to be something he's not necessarily going to be able to come back from. And that fear of, is he going to become the next thing that needs to be stopped if he does do this? But that's still getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. The other element to this is when Ventress says, hey, I need you to choke this snake. She starts with, hey, do you remember our first day here? And he's like, yeah, I do. She's like, no, the thing with the snake. He's like, oh yeah, I remember that too. He's still, like, following the good memory, the happy memory, the pleasant memory of the kiss they shared and probably other things that happened afterwards by the way he's talking. And that's immediately where his mind goes, that he's choosing to see that better side, that better moment, instead of immediately remembering the snake. And then Ventress is like, nope, remember this part. This is what I need you to do. And again, just teaching him that the dark side can betray you and do all of these really terrible things that you would never be able to expect. And you have to get yourself to that level in order to be able to do the things he wants to be able to do to stop Dooku. But that's really what I have on these two chapters. Like I said, it's a very quick journey for Vos that goes from being open with Ventress to going down this dark path somewhat willingly without really understanding the ramifications of it. I'm enjoying how he's opening himself up more to Ventress, but Ventress is now put in this position of having to lie to him more than she did before. It's almost this idea of one of them always has to be lying to the other in order for this mission to work, because this mission is still almost like this problematic driving force between the two of them, that maybe if there wasn't this whole killing Dooku business, they might be able to figure something out. But now go ahead and tell me what you thought of the chapter. Leave a comment below. For next week, let's read chapters 15, 16, and 17. That's 3 chapters, 15, 16, and 17. If you're not already, follow us on the socials, and I'll talk to you guys next week.